Good afternoon. My name is Bahman Yazdanfar, and this is Turnaround, a weekly show that my colleague John Hardy and I bring to you to discuss different aspects of the human nature when it comes to the relationships, especially in the organizations when we have the collective number of the people working together, and in many cases they don't get along or affects the productivity in that organizations. Today, because of last month guest we had was very interesting. We asked him to come again, and we are hoping to have him at least once a month to update us about the development and issues regarding the science and spirituality, or science and God, which probably it will interest you as well. Welcome back, John.
Well, thank you both very much for inviting me. I feel very honored.
Honor is ours, first of all. We are honored.
Let that be understood from the start.
And an opportunity to bring the products of my studies and thinking to humanity, because that's my role as a doctor. Doctor in Latin means a teacher, and you can't teach something you don't know. Many.
So I can call myself doctor too?
Yeah, you can. I give you permission.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I'm joking.
Before anything, I notice you have something hang on your chest, and I didn't want to ask you before the show, because if there is an element of surprise, I want to our viewers see it on my face here. Can you explain what it is?
Yeah, are we ready to go on to that topic? Yeah.
No. I want to get that out of my mind. Otherwise, I cannot even
get it
think.
off your chest. Yeah.
Yes, so to speak.
Okay.
Yes.
What it is?
This is my latest invention. I have been working for many years on radionics, radiesthesia, ever since many decades, because I know from experience and from my studies of people like William Tiller, the famous physicist, and studies behind the Iron Curtain, Kozyrev and other scientists, that there are interconnectedness between ourselves and higher dimensions that we know exist. So this is another, like an interdimensional bridge, or Merkaba, as it's sometimes called, to bring healing and information into our bodies and to protect us. So there are many similar devices on the market right now, at least 20 different manufacturers making small protection devices, and or other big ones. Very few are actually powered. This has a battery, a cell phone battery, a BlackBerry battery, which is quite powerful, 2.4 amps of power, and the different colors as they cycle through the rainbow of colors activates all of our chakras, which, as you know.
So is it working on your body, or is it working between your body and outside the environment?
It's a bridge between my mind, body, and spirit.
And a spirit.
A spirit, yeah.
So if what would be the difference, let's say in this particular case, what would be the difference with if you did not have it on and you have it on?
A good point. In fact,
how you feel that?
In radionics, actually, you don't need power. Traditionally, you would use a simple device, or sacred geometry has no power, like a mandala.
Okay.
On the back, on inside here, I have the Chartres labyrinth sacred geometry pattern, which is an example of a Mobius coil, and it acts as a transmitter receiver to and from the higher dimensions. And on the back, I have the famous Sri Yantra, which is an ancient Indian, probably the second most important ancient Indian sacred geometry pattern, second only to the Flower of Life.
It's like a pyramid, with
a
pyramid over pyramid over
and
pyramid.
Pyramid too is a sacred geometry, three-dimensional sacred geometry. So these things have been known for ancient times to have some kind of connectedness with higher intelligence.
Let me ask you just very quick, so we can then continue with the spirituality. When I used to travel to India, I noticed some of the, especially the people of the Sikh religion, they used to have a copper made kind of the bracelet but it was not full bracelet. It had two ends that was open, and they said it is kind of the protective or a kind of the healing ability. Is it something? Is it similar to what I was told those days?
Well, throughout history, even back that yes, copper is a precious metal.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual metal. It's an essential element for our body, just like silver and gold and zinc, magnesium, etc. But if you recall back, the Israelites in the desert, they had a similar kind of device. The Urim and Thummim, it was built into the jacket of the priests, and it would interact with higher consciousness and give them messages. The Ark of the Covenant, it was a similar device to this. It had energy, it had healing, and it had communication. It told Moses what to do and what not to do.
Yeah. So if when you have it on, do you physically or mentally or emotionally or spiritually, do you feel a difference, or is it is a very slow process?
Well, it's a slow process, and I wouldn't normally feel much, but in a situation like today, I've just given my own show
intense.
Under challenge. Yeah, under challenge. Hopefully my power comes. I am empowered more.
You are already empowered.
You can see the lights are shining particularly brightly, as you were saying.
Yeah, maybe they're responding to my empowerment. Yeah.
Or my ignorance, one of those.
Yeah.
There was a kind of zzz,
it could be
spoke,
it could be a bridge.
It can be
So I think that we humans are disempowered. We're a disempowered species, and we need to recover our full physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual empowerment. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad that you brought those four categories. Is there any hierarchy or any priority on those four elements between the spirituality, emotionally, and physically?
Yeah, well, yes.
If you put it in the rank, which one would you put on top?
Well, we know from radionic healing, and one of my great teachers, David Tansley, says, always do your healing from the highest level, the causal plane, and it will filter down and in its own intelligence, and it will know what to do in your body. Don't go for the symptom or the disease or the cancer. Let your higher consciousness
to heal it like a power of suggestion in the normal language we use.
Yeah. No, I think it's more than that.
No, it's not.
It's like you're looking. I mean, does this relate to those various planes, the ethereal, astral, etc., various planes? Mm-hmm. Is that sort of
the causal, mental, astral, etheric, and then the physical plane, and the sub-physical plane.
And so you're starting from that highest plane and working
go
your
to
way
the
down.
highest level.
And how you access that?
Well, through things like this, through techniques like prayer, incense, essential oils, Reiki. I'm a Reiki practitioner. So all of these techniques to go deep within, like the ancient Gnostics did, before Christianity took them over and burned them at the stake. Yeah.
So the existence of the religion in general, is it a part of this attempt to access to that highest level of the spirituality?
You asked me that question last time, and
not especially
your
religion.
That we
in
continue.
General,
yeah, we continue because religions, by definition, the word means to restrict and restrain. Religio in Latin is to bind and restrain. So that's abhorrent. It's an abomination. Religion is an abhorrent abomination. We need to go with, as they say, if you don't go within, you go without. And so it means you go without spiritual connection and direction and protection. And you err and commit atrocities that you have to pay for in the next life. That's just why all of these people who are committing atrocities right now, they don't realize that they're digging a hole for themselves. They're shooting themselves in the foot.
Well, you said in the last time that these people are coming back and coming back and coming back, till to the point that they get it straight.
They'll have
so to speak.
Correct. They'll have to create the rebalance the imbalance that they're creating right now. Yeah.
Now Now, today I just sent a video earlier. I was discussing that I saw on the YouTube, and one of the, I don't recall the name of the, because I didn't bring my papers. The person on the video, he was describing very briefly, describing the impact or effect of the culture over individual thinking or individual spirituality, for that matter, to the point to make certain people who want to access to that spirituality, and they want to portray their effort to exhibit that effort. They put them in the pigeonhole of some of these classification of pathology, such as schizophrenia or something like that. Now, I want to ask you this session mainly. I wanted to you just help us to understand, having all of these different system by different people, either scientifically or individually, to access the higher power, higher intelligence over millennia. Why still human beings try to culturally, they try to discard these issues as a whole and try to pathologize certain behavior just because someone is saying what he or she
Interesting does. You use the word culture. So culture can be good, but it can also be a cult.
That's a good
and
point.
it's interesting word, an interesting play on words there. When culture becomes a cult, it's religiosity again. It's dictatorship. It's control. It's enslavement. That's what a cult is.
But isn't that true of all culture, per se?
No, there's good culture and there's cults.
And how do you differentiate that? How do you call, well, I mean, for instance, if someone comes, let's say we have refugees from Syria right now.
Yeah.
And these people are from completely different culture. And all of a sudden you get them, and these people did not have a transition to Europe and somewhere else and gradually come here. You take them from middle of the desert with the old-fashioned culture, bring them and put it in middle of the Toronto city, which is completely open society, and then there is a conflict of the religion, conflict of the costumes. How do you distinguish which one is good culture, which one is cult?
Well, these people should go through some kind of enculturing program to allow them to live more peacefully with us, because this is our culture, and they're coming here. Now, what happens? Do we create a hybrid culture that combines everything and give birth to a new combined hybrid culture or not? Or do they have to comply with us?
But isn't there a lowest common denominator effect?
Yeah.
So what happens is you get a natural dumbing down when you mix. So political correctness basically sort of favors the imbecile,
the majority,
so to speak. You know, in the sense that it's almost like if anybody says something in any way definite in this particular environment, but then that becomes our culture. It's almost the culture that refuses to declare itself a culture, which in itself is a culture, except that here, because it's like a fog, it's not even allowing an individual to be definite. Because if you were, let's say, in the desert, and you've got some very, very clear and distinct culture, it's defining itself, and therefore you can be against it. You can be in opposition to it. I mean, at your own peril, but you can be. But how can you be in opposition to political correctness because it doesn't even define itself?
And breed itself inside.
That's right.
But
so it's even more of a
But
soup.
my question mostly was, how do you justify a good culture? Regardless of differences,
That's right.
how do you justify? Because
in
you
what
said
case
there
would
is
a
a
culture
cult
be good?
and there is a good culture.
Yeah.
How do you? What are your criteria for?
Good question. What are the criteria? And freedom would be pretty high up on the list. If people are free to choose their own lifestyle, their own food, how they bring up their children, within perhaps the broader restraints of our Western culture, so they don't kill their children.
That part of our culture then is good. But then you put the government regulation and stifle that part. How to be, let's say, how to bring up your children.
Yeah.
Then
Well-
how you define that? Which part has to be separated from cult to culture?
Well, an example would be some of the Indian cultures where if the daughter gets involved with an inappropriate boyfriend or partner, she gets killed.
Yeah, well, you go to Middle East, it still is the same.
Yeah. So, should that be allowed here or not?
No, I'm just asking what is the criteria of the good culture and separation of that from a cult.
Again, it's so individual. Our local culture here in this city would be different from another city like Montreal. Their culture is quite different than ours, or the culture in New York or San Francisco or one of the South American capitals. Their cultural values, beliefs, and habits are different. We're unique to each, like personality.
So culture is cult then.
Ultimately, I think there's
Yeah.
I mean, what ends up happening, I believe, is that cults basically represent a minority, whereas the culture
It is
represents the
just
majority.
Yes.
And the thing is, there's a degree of conformity. But this is, I mean, okay, this is the dilemma for me, is if you have no conformity, lost my thing. If you do not have conformity, then you've got basically just like for instance in the traffic outside. If everybody's driving with their own style, traffic doesn't move. There's a certain kind of sort of mechanical sameness required for even a city, this number of people to live together. At the same time, that's going to spill over in terms of certain prejudices, etc.
You're talking about sort of anarchy versus.
Well, I mean, if you take it to the extreme, it's anarchy. But what I'm saying is that, is there a situation in our, given the fact that we are in bodies, that we're separate, we're having to live together, we've got we're physical restrictions and limitations, right? And therefore, isn't there a degree of conformity which is basically forced upon us just for it to work?
Yeah.
I'm more actually arguing against my own basic argument, but in a way, I mean, it's something that I ask myself. In other words, when you get a bunch of people who are very, very individual, and they're all put together, such as the people I refer to as outsiders, nothing happens generally. There's lots of action, but the thing is, there's very little consensus. You know, roads wouldn't be built, hospitals wouldn't be built. It wouldn't really function. And some of the societies in the 18th century, 17th century, in the New World were exactly that. They were experiments of that kind. So what would be so now let's move it into the modern context. We're now looking for something in the future.
Yeah.
So taking this into the future and learning from this, what would that look like, for instance, to you?
Well, you know, ideally, we want to see, as I say, do unto others as you would like to be done to yourself. But now it's do unto others before they do unto you.
But it's always been that.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, in the history, always was like that. I mean, if you go to the Babylonian and come all the way that it is documented, always so collectively, not individually, societies, the tribes, they have tried to get it before someone else get it, or before
that's
they
selfishness.
get taken. Yeah.
Greed and selfishness. So
It has always been there.
what are the opposites of greed and selfishness? It's generosity, kindness, altruism, philanthropism. Those would be the values and ideals we would aspire to.
Oh, that is you see.
But we've always aspired towards
it.
it.
Okay.
Ideal.
I mean, Plato. I was just reading Plato's Seven
Plato
Letters.
is a
It said
symbol of
he's
that.
describing exactly that, how, for instance, he had all those ideals and then political power, and he's describing in detail what happens when, you know, one group displaces the other. What do? The same thing as the previous group, and only now it's their chance.
And it was 2,500 years ago.
Exactly, and at the same time, they knew the right laws, they knew the right thing to do, they had the morality. What ended up happening was invariably the moral individual would die, a heroic death, and the villain would, you know, prosper ignominiously.
The meek shall inherit the earth. That means they get buried first.
Well, essentially, you know, exactly.
What was that again?
The meek shall inherit the earth.
Okay.
Means they get buried first.
Oh, I mean, even I remember watching a cartoon years back called Simpson on TV. At those days, I had the cable, and I don't know. I didn't see the whole episode, but at one point, some people came out walking out of the court. And then the limousine arrived. Apparently, they were acquitted from the whatever they were accused of.
Yeah.
And then someone said, "Who says crime doesn't pay?" There was a sarcastic way to say the criminals always they have the best life, or the people who go beyond a other side of the morality, they have upper hand to those who follow the morality and spirituality.
You know, okay, thus far. So, okay, let's just say that we agree that up till now that's prevailed, right? In this go round.
Yeah. How do
we don't know what happened at Atlantis exactly, but since the Greeks till now, that's more or less been the case. Okay, so now this is all falling apart. So what makes us believe now? Like, in other words, what's different in us than the ancient Greeks? What has actually changed in the individual? Are we molecularly different? You know, I mean, people look quite similar.
Well, maybe we are. Maybe genetically we may have evolved to Homo moralis, a moral human.
But look outside. Is that what you see?
Yes, I do, actually. I see more and more enlightened people.
I like to come to your neighborhood, though.
Yeah.
Listen. I am not really.
You're traveling in a bubble of negativity.
Yes, I am not going to put the last nail on the coffin, so to speak. But I believe I always, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, I came to the conclusion that although individuals are waking up, globally, humankind collectively losing the consciousness.
You think so? Yeah.
That is I'm
no,
feeling.
I don't think so.
Am I wrong?
Yes, you're wrong, because and I studied the famous psychiatrist David Hawkins, who wrote the books like Power versus Force and a whole other series of books, where he examined a lot of these factors and did psychokinetic experiments to determine that, in fact, the average consciousness of humanity has moved up incrementally above the 200 level, which is the level of from power, control, and fear into the level of love. Just a little bit. Yeah.
They actually did a study on that?
Yeah.
But using, I mean, okay, but let's just say we're not using that kind of equipment, and we're actually using more,
just
measurements which are lower tech.
We only see a limited view. It's like a flat Earth. All we can see is a flat Earth in our limited view. We don't have a global viewpoint, and even if we did, the press distorts it. We don't get a true press in the media.
This is true.
We don't get a true picture.
Like, for instance, violence is actually diminished, and yet the perception is that it's increased, so that it's completely distorted.
Hey, it's very interesting. I want to have your take on that. We were talking before the show about the individuals acting. I mean, if we get the whole humanity as one body.
Yes.
And use individuals as a certain cells of each body, different with a different function, but part of the whole entity. I want to ask you something. If we individuals, I'm talking about as an individual, if let's say I today, with some miracle, something happened, which is very unlikely in my case, but all of a sudden I convert or change or switch my thinking 180 degree from being a cynic to being complete optimist.
Yeah.
And let's say from that moment on, I look at and view the world for good things instead of seeing bad things. So I expect to see more of the good than bad. Then therefore I see, oh yes, the consciousness of the humanity has been elevated. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I being forced or confronted with a system that put me down. Not one time, not two times, not three times. People put me down, not 2 times, 3, 4 times. Is there any way, based on your experience, that a person who is optimistic, spiritually or emotionally, can maintain that kind of a state in spite of this adversity or reaction that gets?
The oppression of society.
Yeah.
I'll give you a good example of Paul of Tarsus, St. Paul, who was a rabid extremist, anti-Christian extremist, and killed Christians. And then he had this sudden turning around when he was blinded, and he had his revelatory moment, and he became just as fanatical in the other direction. So he was a fanatic.
From one side,
from one side to the other.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it. I
Does
don't
that really mean
particularly-
enlightenment, though?
Yeah.
Or is that
I wouldn't
basically
think
just
he's the kind of guy
like a
you're going to
lunatic
have a
switching
beer with,
channels?
but-
Yeah, because I mean, what I'm just saying, is that necessarily enlightenment?
No, I'm not talking about just.
Yeah.
I mean, regardless if it is enlightenment or not. What I'm saying is how, as an individual, you maintain that positive attitude
In the face of
the oppression of the society around you.
Well, when you're in the positive domain, you get
Even
help.
if
You get help.
from who?
Well, we talked about it in the
It's-
my last show.
I believe that
You're talking about
from the angels.
internally from the upper
From the upper echelon,
not
yeah.
from my peers
No.
or colleagues, though.
Yes,
Yeah, but indirectly.
they become
yes.
the vehicles.
Yeah,
And actually,
indirectly.
I've personally experienced that.
Yeah.
Can you share with that?
Yeah. I'll give an experience. I
Yeah.
would say that, I mean, I had, one disaster befall me after another, and then finally I had this thing happen where basically I just was out of money, period. In other words, the nightmare that everybody can't even imagine, for the most part in the middle class, where your last credit card, which had a huge amount on it, I didn't even know and I didn't want to know.
You're talking about my
Basically-
present situation, right?
Well, so in other words, at least in one thing I'm ahead of you.
Okay.
So anyways, so all of a sudden one day I'm at, I think it was tuna at the herbalist, and again, a very small item, a $20 item or something like that. We run the card, it doesn't work, and he said, "Oh, there must be a mistake." But I knew it wasn't a mistake. I knew that number, and we were talking the tens of thousands on that card because I'd had a fair amount of money, and so I had a lot on that card. That was gone, and I knew now that's it. And I had no actual image of what would happen when that happened, because I'd never encountered that before. It was a reality that just literally was just like, I couldn't even engage with the possibility. So I didn't think about it. I just sort of spent and figured that somehow or other some miracle would happen or something. Anyways, it didn't happen, and boom, it popped, right? So what was the first thing that happened was that he gave me the bag of herbs and said, "Look, pay me when you can." And then I was actually going out that evening with somebody, and it was a very attractive woman, etc., and it was going to be an expensive date, but it was too late to cancel, and I had a little bit of money, etc., so tried to figure
You
out a
had
way.
herbs.
Well, no, I had herbs, but and I tried to figure I'll get away with one beer. Then immediately she went for the oyster option, everything like that, and I was thinking to myself, that's it, I'm done. Sure enough, by the end of the evening, she ended up insisting on paying everything. I described the situation, and that was like a second experience. And so what was interesting about it was here, after this, literally this thing, which I was afraid of more than anything in the world, so much so that I couldn't even engage with the possibility.
Okay.
And then bang, when it happens, and I'm in this place, well, in a sense, you're in a place of surrender. It's like, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And what were the first two experiences?
The same night.
The same night, literally within hours of that, were kindness from strangers.
And
actually,
how you describe
now, of
that,
course, things went down from there. But
how do you describe those experiences as a result of your optimism? You didn't change, did you?
No.
You were afraid.
No, I wasn't actually. This is what was interesting. I was in a place, it's just like, you fear something the most until it happens. Whereas once it happens, you're in it, right?
You don't have the fear is always for unknown.
Exactly. So all of a sudden, it's almost like if this is going to happen, now all of a sudden now you're in this reality, which you couldn't imagine, but you're here, right? You're still the same person, you're breathing, you look at your hands, they're still there, right? You're still alive, right?
Yeah.
So there's a kind of now what? And what that was, it was a shift of state. And I'm not saying complete optimism, but it was a shift of state from one of having a supposition of something going to happen, right?
So I had the reality that is
exactly, and I had my beliefs about people and everything, whereas now I'm thrown out of that reality just by the shock of the situation. It's like, in a sense, like a financial, post-death situation, where boom, now what? Yeah. And I think it's exactly that state of not knowing
that you get
that creates that openness. Well, no, I think what it is, it's our belief in knowing. So for instance, when you're talking about, when you're going along and you have these expectations, those expectations are going to impact how you see that other person, how you engage with them. They will experience that, right? So it's just like a child. If you're engaging with a child critically,
they respond, right? Is reaction a reaction?
They will respond.
Of course.
Whereas if you're the mother and every silly thing that the little child does is just miraculous, well, of course the child's going to be responding in a much different way, right? And so ultimately, it's in a way it's as simple as that, but it's multiplied and multiplied through everything. And ultimately, I think what ends up happening is that what we really do is we shut ourselves off from the light. So it's more like an active thing that we're doing. Once we stop doing that, we don't even have to orient ourselves to the light. We have to just stop orienting ourselves towards the negative. Once that happens, instantly there's a shift. So there would be an example. Yeah.
John, what the other John just said, have you had a spiritual, similar spiritual?
I try to practice.
I don't want to say settle it in the level of the credit card and $20 of the herbs. I want to go a little bit further.
raise a little bit higher.
I want to raise the bar a little bit.
Of course, things went to hell in a handbasket soon after that. However, at least I had a couple of good experiences.
This is another show about the
yeah, exactly what happened next.
Well, what John says is right. We have to abolish fear, which is like putting it behind us and then clearing the space, seeing the light rather than the darkness, or seeing the glass as half full rather than half empty. So it's a matter of perception. And one of my great studies was the Course in Miracles. They said a miracle.
Course in Miracles.
Course
by
in
Marion
Miracles.
Williamson. Yeah.
A miracle is a change in perception, which is a viewpoint, a change in your viewpoint. So you start looking ahead through the windscreen of your car rather than driving using the
radar, for instance, or
the
rear view mirror.
Or the rear view mirror.
The rear view mirror. Instead of driving your car with the rear view mirror, where you have a lot of accidents, you look ahead, and most people drive the car of their life by the rear view mirror.
Yeah, right? I guess it makes sense. As crazy as it sounds,
okay,
it's what we do.
You brought you used the word miracle, and I have noticed personally that has been again. I don't want to connect it to religion, but I noticed that religious people use it more often than non-religious people.
But they don't know what a miracle is.
I understand, and that is what I want to you clarify the distinction. For instance, I not only remember, I confronted with people who claim that they have seen certain things, which you talk about perception, which I try to convince them from my side that is perception, that they have seen Mary bleeding blood on the stone or something like that, or similar things with the environment or something like that. Again, I'm not discarding their view. What I'm saying is they immediately put a name miracle to that, and because of that miracle, therefore, thou shall follow that.
Which is a classification system. Does it qualify?
Especially in Islam, from the country that I was born in, people use it when I was growing up. A lot of that. Yeah. Now, or even in Christianity, Jesus walk on the water, or making the water to be wine, or something like that. I'm not again discarding their belief system. What I'm saying is, putting the word miracle on an event that is not really worldwide viewed. So it could be either perception or figment of imagination of some few people. How do you distinguish between the miracle you were talking and this miracle?
Good point, because I think there are different kinds of miracles in different areas. There are miracles that are done to us that the global geographical, geological anomalies, for example. You could say it's a miracle. People are about to have a car accident and the car is suddenly moved to the side. But simple miracles like that you described, where things take a turn for the best, seems to be a consequence of the way we think and intend. If you read the book The Intention Experiment by Lynn McTaggart, she talks about how, and the work of Tiller, Professor Tiller, the physicist, who's shown that a group of people with a combined intention will change reality, will change the temperature of water, the electrical conductivity, and the pH of water in the laboratory.
Right, but what about this? And this is the thing that I've always had difficulty with. To me, my understanding of the spiritual path is that it's a big part of it is taking what's coming your way and handling it with grace, right? So it's an acceptance of what is and then dealing with it. So, for instance, in terms of this kind of logic, right, that if we just learn to focus our attention with enough skill, we can actually manifest what we like. Well, then the implication was that Christ just didn't quite have it right because he ended up on the cross. There is, so that there is no kind of acknowledgement then of suffering within that paradigm, that sort of the classical secret thing. You want it, you manifest it, and if you're not manifesting it, well, then obviously something's off. I mean, how do you speak to that? What is the role of suffering in this?
The role of
suffering in the spiritual path. In the purification of the fire.
Well, you could say it would be said then that it's a training, it's a learning experience. It's dealing with fear. It's forcing us to deal with fear, and to realize that at some level we chose that. At a spiritual level, we chose that suffering. So, in order to teach us a lesson, to rise above it. In other words, rather than to be pulled down by it, we rise above.
Exactly. But then, therefore, in situations, it's just like courage and cowardice.
Yeah.
People are constantly thrust into situations where. So actually, let's take a look at the oppressor and the oppressed, right? Now, the oppressor is not learning much, but the oppressed has a chance. But when you take a look at the vast majority of the oppressed, given a chance, they become the oppressor. So it becomes a very, very small minority of the oppressed, right? So at least the oppressed has an opportunity. But the thing is that
oppressed has an opportunity to learn, but
exactly,
but they don't practice it.
Well, or rather, it's very rarely practiced. So what has really changed then? Like what I'm saying is that if people can manifest their way out of this, aren't they sidestepping the real show, which is dealing with these events which are the way through which they're going to work their way to higher consciousness?
I think if they can get it early enough and navigate their way, see it coming, the suffering coming, navigate around it, they can obviate or eliminate the need to go through the suffering.
See, this to me is a very, very dangerous place to go. Because what this is again going down to, and to me, in a way they would, others would argue, this is sort of the devil's trick. Is what is the devil, and Scott Peck talks about this too, is that ultimately, evil invariably tempts us with a shortcut, a way to somehow avoid suffering. Right?
To suffer or not?
To avoid suffering.
To avoid suffering.
In other words, you can have the fruit without suffering, which is the classic credit card.
Yeah.
We could choose.
That's right.
We can choose to avoid suffering. Jesus could have chosen to avoid suffering.
Yeah, but this is just it. Now, if he could have chosen to avoid suffering,
why didn't he?
Then why didn't he? And what? So we figured he just was missing something, or
no? But he
didn't take the Course of Miracles.
And Edgar Cayce tells us that he had 30 lifetimes before he prepared himself for that one that we know about, and maybe he had subsequent. Maybe he's living right now in another lifetime.
Well, you might be him for all we know. But
Definitely not me.
Yeah, there are certain things which are fixed points, but
It's very interesting that you are talking about the process of the learning, both of you, about the process of learning. I was watching someone was talking in, again, one of these clips, educational clips, and again, I don't remember the names. I usually focus on the subject matter rather than the who is saying it. And he was saying either lobster or crab. He said very interesting, when they are growing through their shell, their shell doesn't go bigger. So what they do, they put themselves in an axis of the larger fish to grab them and crack their shell, so they break, so they can free themselves and go to a larger shell. And this is the very, and he was say, his conclusion was, if you just observe that process, that means you cannot grow without suffering. But the question that boggles my mind over my short life, or rather lengthy life, is everybody that I met in my life has either complained or explained or proud of what he or she went through in his or her life.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the practice, they don't apply it.
in what sense? Explain that.
For instance, you were talking about oppressor and oppressed.
Right.
Oppressed always have opportunity, even if it doesn't have opportunity, is in the corner, has to learn to deal with the issue, but never does anything to release himself from the force of the oppressed.
Well, no, but I think that's not the learning. The learning is ultimately, because very often you can't. You're in a situation.
That is just one item.
Right? But I think the key is that when the oppressed now is in a position to oppress or not, that's when the choice really becomes enacted, right?
No,
And
I'm
that's when-
oppressed, yes.
That's when the oppressed, I'm saying, is now placed in a position.
Oppressor, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that in most of the time they behave, which then means that they're probably then caught back up in the cycle. Now that having turned into the oppressor, now they're going to be stuck in that cycle too, just like the oppressed, and they have to come back again to relearn.
Why is that? They did learn it.
But the thing,
how you describe that?
And the thing about that then is that if so few are learning it, and the vast majority given this opportunity would avoid this experience in the first place, isn't this just a trap of tricking people into thinking that you can avoid paying the piper? And so they're actually going to go to hell in a handbasket by visualizing, like for instance, The Secret has us visualize black Mercedes and various things that we want to have. And this is our way, so that we can basically, conjure up a black Mercedes and with that drive our way out of trouble's way. I mean, this is more or less the implication. It's oversimplification, but not that much.
So in a way, you bring up the point of vengeance versus forgiveness.
Well, okay, no, but we know that forgiveness is better. But what I'm saying is that if you're not presented in that dilemma, if for instance, what are the pains in life? It's loving and not getting love back. It's losing a child. It's all kinds of things are intense, horrible pains, right? Mm-hmm. But those are the opportunities when we actually can learn, when we change. I mean, it's not when, business is good, things are fine, we're visualizing, we're being gratified by, all the customers are coming to us.
Self-deception.
Well, the thing about it is, when things are going well, what are we really learning?
Yeah, and you see, we're not here for what they call an R&R lifetime, rest and recreation lifetime. We're here to learn, to grow.
Exactly. And so what happens is when we get the chance to visualize, right? Do we sit there and say, visualize, God, send me the lessons that will help me, that will help me to grow the most? No, we basically say, God, will you give me something that's going to make life very pleasant?
Yeah, well, give me a big house, or give me
a house, or that person who I love me back, and all these kinds of things. I mean, what lunatic says, basically put me into the fire and make the fire a little hotter. I wouldn't say lunatic, it'd be very elevated, but who asked for that?
So apparently, when we enter this lifetime, we have chosen all of these events, it seems.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But now, if we've chosen the events, and now we get some technology, whether it be that piece or any other piece.
What is it called?
It's called the quantum energizer.
Okay, whether it be
but it also activates the pineal gland.
which
which is for inspiration.
an inspiration, but whatever it be, right? But if our intention with that device or any other device is basically to somehow sidestep those tests that have been sent our way, isn't that then actually a move in exactly the wrong direction? Then we've missed the purpose, what we are actually placed here for, and therefore we're almost a priori, basically missing the boat and are going to come back anyways then.
What's your thought on that?
What's your take on that?
Well, it's important to look within ourselves, I think, to get guidance from our superconscious, from the archetypes of what our purpose is in this lifetime. Like for example, I had a great career as a neuroscientist at the University of Toronto, but I gave it all up to do a degree in electrical engineering, which was a very tough 4-year program. But
especially when you're older.
I was age 29 at the time.
Plus you're already established in what you're doing.
I was very clearly told, it's like a missionary is told to give up his comfortable life and go and be a missionary in Africa. And for some people it's so clear and powerful that they know they have to obey that.
That would be an example.
That is a contrast. Actually, it is a contrast that John is alluding earlier on that. Why is not more common? Why it is just always we are talking about very
minority.
Specific,
Well, I think
insignificant minority?
I think it's more common than you realize that many people do get these divine directives, I call it. That
do they act upon it?
Well, most of us do, yeah. I think.
Or if we don't,
other,
we don't, something more
well, good point,
will
because
happen.
then it's called if you don't do what you're told to do, it comes and hits you, and it's called karma dura. It's a hard
karma.
It's a hard shot.
Hard karma. But if you take soft karma and do things that are like being here today is uncomfortable. It's stressful, but it's part of it's karmic
that's
yoga.
Because of the quality of the couch.
In a gentle kind of a way. If I don't do this, I might be hit by something more severe.
Okay,
that
exactly.
means they're talking to us. Is that hard?
For instance,
it's a pleasure and enjoyable.
So far,
a nice, gentle karma
compared
is
to some other
enjoyable.
horrors that might befall you if you didn't.
Playful, playful karma, I might call it.
But exactly. But here's an example of precisely the virtuous road is not sidestepping. It's like because obviously when things are going well and to sort of give it up for the unknown, that's a difficult thing to do. Precisely. So once again, there's a degree of suffering, there's a degree of angst. Also, for instance, if you happen to be married, your wife's not going to be, excited about this notion, and you're going to have to go through, because conventional society is not going to applaud the individual who does this.
That's part of the challenge. Yeah.
Part of the challenge, part of the suffering. But once again, in a sense, I think you're making my argument, which is that growth and suffering go together. That there is a sacrifice that needs to be made for growth.
A sacrifice. And then in the word, interesting word, isn't it? Sacrifice in Latin means to make sacred.
So it becomes sacred.
To make sacred.
Sacrifice
it's not just
just
destroy yourself.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you destroy yourself.
No.
We get because we're supposed to go to the other program too. Let me at the end. We are close to the end of the program. Let me ask you a little bit. I want to elaborate on this the issue of the commonality or lack thereof. Individuals understanding their callings but not acting upon it.
Yeah.
When you go to a public event, talking to different people, always they are talking about love and happiness and all of that. And when you ask for the definition, usually not all times, is very materialistic. It is either I want to have a good job, I want to have a good family, nobody really sits and tells me, at least in my experience, talking about himself or herself, that what they want to feel inside or what is their spiritual level. Why is that? that even though we are getting after 2,500 years from the Plato on, let's say, that everybody is shooting at that higher achievement, spirituality.
Yeah.
And especially in last 100 years that we have technology and information available to the public globally. And people understood that the status quo is not really a happy life for them. Why aren't more people act upon their callings?
Why aren't more people
Acting upon their calling, upon
their
their
calling? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Heeding the
when
call.
I'll refer you to a book called Vibrational Medicine by Dr. Gerber. And in one of his chapters, he tells us the different dimensions, the physical, etheric, astral, mental, and the causal. Now, the mental plane is the plane of thought. So we have 3 levels of thinking available to us. It's called the ego.
Okay.
So we have the higher ego, which has these higher thoughts. When we rise above the lower thoughts, and that those higher thoughts can take us up into the causal plane, our spiritual thoughts. People who do things that are philanthropic, the Mother Teresas of the world, for example. The middle is it's like mediocrity, the middle course of Buddhism. But the lower mental plane is the plane of fear and power and survival. And we have a choice. Which level do you want to be at? Where do you want to play today in this issue?
So
matter?
generally speaking, we are stuck at the first level of the fear and
we can be.
mediocrity.
No, we have choice.
No, I understand we have choice. But generally speaking, most people are stuck in that level.
Well,
I
that's
guess
a negative viewpoint.
But also I think where they
No.
come in. Let's say if you happen to come in and you're poor, you're probably at the lowest, right? In terms of your default.
Yeah.
If you happen to be middle class, you're going to go to the middle one. Whereas nobody by default is going to go to the third one. It's going to be an effort for both to reach up into the higher plane.
No, and it's not
that's my
about
take on
class,
it.
really. There are people who are born so spiritual that they're always in that higher plane.
No, okay, that's the exception though that makes the rule.
Yeah, we call
right?
them saints.
Those are saints, and 1 in a billion.
Well, Buddha was the son of
what
a
I'm just saying
king,
is,
yeah.
I know it's not even about. But if you happen to be basically born on the on the streets of Mumbai and everything like that, I mean, and everybody else is just grabbing and killing and doing or whatever they happen to be doing. Yes, that's going to be the natural place you go. If you're in a middle class place where basically people are following rules, well then it would you'd be a lunatic or a psychopath to go start behaving
do
in that
that,
way.
yes.
So you'll stay to that. But there's no place, even if you were in a monastery, a Buddhist monastery, there would be no place where the dominant behavior would be the third. That's still an
there's
effort
a
from
famous
everyone.
saying,
Right?
to be in the world but not of the world. So I would say don't go to a monastery. Your monastery is right here in the world.
No. The point
Yes,
I'm trying to say is by default we are not
In that place.
born in that place. We have to work on it to get
No,
to that
that's not
place.
true. That's not true.
So you believe there are people
Who
who
are
were born in that
born
place?
saints.
Okay, but no.
Born
But what I'm
saints,
saying,
yeah.
by default, for most of us, like with the
Yeah.
with a few exceptions of the saints, for everybody else, I mean, it is a struggle. It is the path of least resistance is to go to one of those other 2 levels of consciousness, because that's what fits. That's what's coming our way,
Or
and so that we reciprocate.
reborn again and again and again.
I mean, in which case we get born
And
again.
then
but,
maybe they
you know,
have been, and like Joan of Arc was a saintly person, maybe because she had multiple lifetimes and eventually got it right. And as I said,
Perhaps,
Edgar
exactly.
Cayce tells us that Christ manifested physically in 30 different lifetimes, one of which was Melchizedek, another was Enoch, and others. So he was practicing and practicing to get it right ultimately.
We'll leave it at that for this session, and I hope at least I get it.
Well, for this week anyways. So for
Not-
the next week
not-
will
not
be an
much of
improvement
a-
at
not
least.
much of a hope, but at least
the directions to
thank you, John,
great
again
pleasure.
for
Thank
the
you.
for the wisdom
Yeah.
that you bring to this show. And I mean, is a way some of the things you say is above my head because of my limited education or limited understanding. But I hope at least I get to the idea of that path.
Well, even if not this lifetime,
No,
sooner
no,
or
but,
later.
but the only thing that really, the only thing that John really aspired me for first session was, so there is a chance I don't have to really kill myself in this lifetime.
Yeah. Oh, but you've got lots of lifetimes to go. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's right. I mean,
So
give yourself,
there is
give
ample
yourself,
opportunity
give yourself
available.
room. That's right. Don't.
Do you have anything for the end of the show?
No. Just wanting to encourage you to take it easy.
Thank you, folks. That was our show for this lovely Tuesday, 2nd of the February 2016. Please tune us next week, the same time, same place, and see you next week. Thank you and good
Bye.
night.
Yeah.
Got my city, got my sin, got my baby, I'm rolling in. Well, she's gone on high. I know she's lost, she's gonna die.